So if you just give me your name and how long you've been involved in flight.
Yeah, my name's Walt Hubert, and I've been flying since I was 15, and next year it'll be 60 years in the aviation business. So
great. Let me just make sure. Okay, well, why don't you start off by telling us? You said you first started flying when you were 15. Tell us that story. Tell us how you first got interested, when you kind of caught the bug, and.
Well, I was interested before then. I remember sitting in my mother's in the kitchen, and we had a breakfast nook, and had a table there, and I would diddle on make drawings of airplanes and figure out ways that I could afford to build them. And I looked at wallpaper using for cover and the tubing electrical tubing, things like that. So I had model airplanes. I was into model airplanes at probably 9 years old, and I just decided. My parents, they knew nothing about it, and I went out, and there was a guy by the name of Isselhart. And he was not retired, he was after World War II, he was a Navy pilot, and he started teaching at the Belleville Airport, which is on Route 159. At that time, it's gone now. And I'd go out there and I'd save my money, and I'd spend $5 on a weekend, and he'd teach me for a half hour. And he got $2 of it, and the airport got $3. So, and we flew J3 Cubs and Aeronica 7ACs. And it took me about 3 months, because I could only, on a Saturday go out there. And it took me about 3 months to solo. And I'll never forget, I told him one time, I said, we were on J3 Cub. And I said, does this thing, will it do a loop? And he said, oh yeah. So we went up to about 3,000 feet, and he did a loop, and so we did our thing. And then when I graduated, or got my license, my student license, they call it, went out, and he said, okay, he says, take it around a pattern and go out and fly a little bit and then come back, and I'll watch your landing. And first thing I did, I went out of sight and did my first loop. And I was stuck, so I've been flying ever since. And even then, when I told you I worked at Emerson all those years, that was always in the aviation, basically almost always in the aviation industry part of it. And so I've worked on airplanes ever since I can remember. And I'm an A&P licensed mechanic, but I rebuild airplanes. That's my hobby. And I got all set when I was going to retire. I knew I was going to retire, and I had a lot of tools. And I bought up a lathe and a mill and 3 different kind of welders, and I was all set when I retired. I just kind of went into the business. But I've done about 6 complete rebuilds and a couple from scratch. And one of them was a World War I SE-5. And that's the one that was in the movie.
Okay. So you've built, you said 6 airplanes since you retired, and when was that?
95.
95. So.
Yeah. No, 6 is probably 4, about 4 since I retired, but the 2 before while I was still working, just do it in the evenings, but now I do it full time.
And what is the appeal of building an airplane different from the appeal of flying the airplane, or is it from the same? What is the interest in the build?
My background is I'm German heritage, and Germans, I think, just like to take old things and rebuild them. And that I could never see an old thing like an old airplane or even an old car. I used to do cars years ago. And I just enjoyed that. But flying, it's 2 different things, 2 totally different things. Of course, when you're building it, you're always looking for the safety. You want to make sure, and anybody that's working on their own airplane is usually pretty cautious and pretty careful about what they do with that equipment. Because when it's up there in the air and something goes astray, you got a major problem. But no, I think it's 2 totally different things. But I enjoy both very much.
Well, tell us about some of your planes that you built and rebuilt.
Well, I think the most interesting one is I bought a salvaged UPF-7, which is a airplane that was built by Waco out of Indiana, and it was a 1940 version, and the poor thing was just in very, very bad shape. And what I do is when I do one like that, I take it completely apart. Everything comes off, every bolt, every nut, every wire, and we sandblast. It's a steel tube fuselage. Sandblast the fuselage, do it with epoxy paint, and start building it, put it back together again. The wood's replaced. You do everything from scratch, And of course, these are wood, basically steel tube fuselages with wooden covering on that with what we call stringers. Then the fabric is stretched over that, and but it's a complete, and that's somewhere between 2 and 3 years to do one of those. And now that one I did before I retired. I started that in '83, and that was about a 4.5-year program. So, and it, by the way, I sold it when I was going to retire. I figured, I need a little more money. You know, I didn't have quite enough. I figured, so I sold it, and I sold it to a gentleman up in Alaska. And he, on the way up there, ran into the side of a mountain, and he put $80,000 damage on that airplane. And of course, he was ashamed to call me because it was a beautiful airplane. And his dad called me and said, oh, he wrecked it, you know. And anyway, they rebuilt it. And then I went up there and Lander, Wyoming, I think it is, and went up and rigged it for him because the guy that rebuilt it didn't know anything about biplanes. This was a biplane. And anyway, I went up and re-rigged it, and he took it up to Alaska, and he decided up there, he quit his job. He was a Northern Air Cargo transport pilot, and he quit his job to hop rides in this Waco. And he lasted 2 years up there, and then he moved down south because the season was too short to make any money. And he is now, I talk to him about every month or two, and he's got 12,000 landings and takeoffs in that airplane, so it's holding up pretty well.
Now, how did he find out about that you had the airplane for sale? How does that?
I had advertised it, and in what they call Trade-A-Plane, which is the publication when you're buying or selling an airplane. And he called 6 months later. I had some lookers, and nobody wanted to pay the amount. And he called me, and he said, "It's still for sale." I said, "Well, I don't know. I'm going to retire. I guess I'll sell it, you know." And he come down and looked at it, and he said, "I'll take it," you know. So he took it. Anyway, that one, and I guess and that was a rebuild. The one from scratch we built, and this was with the help of Parks College. I was on the board of advisors at Parks for 8 years, and what we decided we looked at building a World War I airplane, because when you go to air shows, you never see a World War I. You see World War II and all kinds of home builds and that. So I got a group together, 5 of us, and we went and started building, and got the drawings from the Smithsonian and the Air Force Museum in Dayton. And they were very helpful. Dayton actually assigned a volunteer to us. When I needed something measured, I'd call him up and he'd go out, because they have a full-scale SE-5 there, and it's also a biplane. And we bought everything from scratch. We bought steel tubing and wood and so forth, and made it from scratch. And that was a long program, and that was again before I was retired. That was in '89, '90. And I went to Parks College, and Dr. Whalen was the president then, and like I said, he had me there working as a consultant for him. And so he took the senior class of 90, I believe it was, and assigned 2 groups of 5 each to study this airplane. And they made wind tunnel tests, and they built models of it, and decided we did make some minor, well, I shouldn't say minor change, we made some changes. We took the airfoil, made it a safer airfoil, and made it, the objective was, I told the class, I said I want it safer and more economical if we can do that, and better performance. And so that was their thesis for their graduation. And so we had these 2 teams, and we married all that data together, and then took off, started building them. And there's actually 3 of them completed. 2 of them, a lot of people don't realize the work involved in building an airplane from scratch. And 2 of the guys gave up after a little while, and they sold their rigs to other people. One of them is in Canada, and one I think is in Oklahoma that hasn't been finished yet, but the other one's flying. And the gentleman just called me that I sold mine to, and he won first place. Warbird in, I guess it was Tennessee. They had a big fly-in there, and he won first place with that. And then the last one I did, which not the last one, I'm doing one now, but the one I did before that was a PT-26, which is a World War II trainer. And it's a low-wing, mostly wood airplane, and I did the same thing, completely rebuilt it. And I sold it about 4 months ago. And the gentleman bought it on a Thursday, took it to the Southwest Regional Air Show and won Grand Champion Warbird with it on Sunday. He had it 4 days. But it was very nice of the guys. He told me, so I didn't build this, and so they sent me a trophy too.
Oh, great.
So,
Yeah, I was going to ask you, when they use your plane, do you get credit?
Well, normally you don't, but this guy he said, oh no, he said, I didn't build it. He said, I just bought it, and so they sent me a trophy too, which I thought was very nice of them.
And so you mentioned that most people don't know how long that the projects take. What's kind of average length of time?
The average on building an airplane is 7 years. And I would say the average of rebuilding one is almost the same, because although a lot of parts you don't have to make, but you got to take everything apart and clean everything and start from scratch. And of course, in the older aircraft, you have to make a lot of parts. And according to the FAA's rules and regulations, you can make the part if it's your airplane, and if it's made out of the same material, and you meet the drawings. Now, the problem with that is that there aren't any drawings in most cases. These are one of a kind, most of them, not one of a kind, but very few of them out there. And some of the companies, even the FAA and the people up at Wright-Patterson, don't want to give out information because of liability. They're scared to death. Funny story, I went to a National Auto and I needed rivets. The old brakes on these were just like the old cars. You had riveted linings on them. I went in there and I gave the guy a rivet and I said, okay, I need some of these. And we're just talking, and he puts them on the counter, he's making a bill out, and he said, oh, what are you using these old rivets on? I said, oh, an airplane. And he took those off the counter, can't sell them to you. I said, what do you mean you can't? He said, I can't sell them. He said, they're aircraft. He said, I can't do that. So I sent my son down a couple days later. I said, it's for a tractor. But yeah, and that's one of the problems with, we were talking about the youngsters being a tough time getting to learn to fly because of the cost and so forth. And our rules have dictated, we are still flying engines today, manufactured brand new, that were designed in 1932. Because they can't change them, because if they change them, the FAA requires thousands of hours and mucho bucks to make a change, so they just stick with what they got, basically. And as most people, if they see this coming, but Burt Rutan, who won the $1 million or $10 million to go up, to space and so forth, he's a home builder. He's an EAA member. But he was EAA, that's the advantage we have with the EAA and home built airplanes. You can put automobile engine in them, and you can do your thing, but you can't make a production model out of it. So you either build it yourself or you pay $200,000 for an airplane, which has got less in it than an automobile.
And talk about the EAA a little bit, and how that group works, and kind of this kind of community of builders. I take it you exchange.
Oh yeah. It's a great organization, and I say that everybody has politics. There's some people disapprove because they're kind of closed knit. They don't tell everybody about the money situation. And we pay a minimal. I think my thing is $40 a year, but for that every month you get a tremendous magazine. I mean, it's glossy. It's really beautiful. But the heart of the thing is helping each other. If you have any problem, you can call up. Our headquarters is up in Wisconsin, and you can call up there, and they have people on staff all the time. We have a great museum up there too, Air Museum, great museum, and you can call up there and get any kind of information. They just have a ton of knowledge and people that know from yesteryear. But the thing is that we have a annual meeting, or if you will, fly-in. It lasts a week, and when you can go up there and they will teach you to weld right on the spot. They have tables and tables of people, professional welders, that'll sit there and show you how to arc weld or TIG weld or whatever, and that includes woodwork, fabric work. They have safety sessions, and we'll run 1 million people through there in a week. And everybody brings airplanes, and then you look at each other's, and then that's the national organization. Then each chapter, just like chapter 32 and chapter 64, and we meet monthly, and we have what we call a tool group, a guy that controls it, and we donate so much money into that, and then he buys tools that the average builder would only use once, and that way you go in, it's free, you know, you just borrow it. You leave a check for the amount of the tool it's worth, and you take it home, do what you got to do, and send it back. And that includes riveting, silly things, not silly, but things like cable tension. You have cable that go out to the wing that control the ailerons and that, and it should be a certain tension. Well, a cable tensioner is probably a $300 tool, which you'd use when you set up your airplane and you're done with it, you know. So those kind of tools we have in a storehouse, and we have different guys over the different years take care of it. And you can go and borrow that tool anytime you want. But it's a great organization, and without that, I think general aviation would have died a long time ago without that, because that has saved us. And they go to bat for us too, for, you know, keeping the rules rational, you know, because if they have an accident, they want to ground all the airplanes in the country because they have one accident or one wing failure or something, you know, and they find out later this guy just was crazy and did something really bad and broke the wing or whatever, and then they want to cancel or eliminate all of them. But it's a good organization, very friendly, and a lot of knowledge. There's a lot of knowledge there.
So is everybody in the organization, are they all building their own planes?
Oh, no.
No.
No, we have people that are just interested in aviation to join and come and fraternize. We have our own little air shows and pancake cooks and make a little money, you know, and we just did a chili thing. But we have owners who never turned a screwdriver, and we have guys that just maintain their own airplane. And then you have guys like myself who build from scratch, and we have guys that, you know, just rebuild stuff or paint their airplane or something like that. But the FAA is very strict on what you can do yourself. Now, you can do it, for instance, if you owned an airplane and you wanted to change the tires or change the spark plugs, there's certain things you can do. But then if you do, even if you want to paint it, then you got to, when you paint it, you got to balance the ailerons again. They got to weigh the same and all that. You can do that, and you can call me as an A&P, and I can come and write in your logbook and say, you know, I weighed them for you and I approved it. You can actually do the work yourself. But they're very stringent about that, and without this organization, it would be difficult to maintain your own airplane.
So how many people in your chapter would you say are building planes? Like, how big a group is that?
Okay, like I say, I think our number is around 75 members, 30, 35 that come to meetings. Of that right now, there's probably 10 that are actually working on their airplane, building them from scratch or repairing them, or, you know, whatever they're doing with them. I think there's 5 that got kits, if you will, and today it's becoming they're making some fantastic kits where you can buy the wing panel, which would be as big as this table, will have all the holes punched in it for the rivets already. Which gives you a hell of a startup, and then you just put the rib in there, and well, first you take the rib. It's aluminum usually, and it's bent over like this. And what you do is you take a scribe or a pen and you mark it halfway, right in the middle of that rib. And you put that rib in that sheet metal, you line it up with that hole. Then you drill that, and then that's what they call a pilot hole. Then you get it all clecoed together, and then you drill the final, and then you deburr them. And you got to do this on every hole. And you deburr them, and then you go back and cleco them all together again. Then you start riveting. You cleco every other hole. Then you put a rivet in every other hole. Then you come back and take the clecos out and do the rest of it. It's a long process.
And what is the biggest challenge of rebuilding these planes? I mean, what rebuilding or building? What's that?
To make the challenge is to end up with something that your peers would congratulate you on. That's the bottom line. Yeah, right.
Well, tell us about the plane that you built that was later in the movie.
In the movie? Well, like I said earlier, you know, we did that because it was a later design in World War I. It actually had, believe it or not, the engine was a cast aluminum engine. That's 1917. So you talk about casting aluminum, and that, you know, that was a state of the art in those days. And it was built by the Royal Aircraft Factory in England. It was their design, and it just had it had radio, you know, and had flying wires that were not round but airfoiled, formed, and it just had a lot of neat features in it compared to the Spad and some of the old World War I first fighters that came out. So in a matter of 3 years, the technology is leaps and bounds in technology. So that's the airplane we looked at and got together and decided to build it. And then, like I said, that was about a 7-8 year program. But we were building 5. And what we did is we took it and we decided that, I was going to be in charge of building wings in the center section and the landing gear. Another guy was going to do the fuselage, another guy do the tail feathers and the engine and things like that. So when I started building, we had a biplane, and you have, like 40 ribs, and for every rib, it's made out of wood, top and the bottom, and you have structural parts that go into it. And when you have the structural part with a piece here and a Y coming into it, you put what they call a gusset on there on both sides, and you glue that. And I cut 10,000 gussets for those 5 airplanes. And we put on a bandsaw kind of. But anyway, back to why we did that, or what we did. And we got going on it, and then some of the guys decided it was just too much work for them. They didn't have the time, so forth. So we split up, and me and a guy by the name of Don Hickman went together, and we built 2 of them. And the other guys went on their own way. And we finished ours, and we were the first to fly, and to prove out the design, because it was an unproven design, weight and balance and everything. And then I guess about, this goes back about 2 years ago when they were making the movie for Aviator. And my wife, I came home one night and she said, this movie company called, and they want you to have your airplane in the movie. And I said, yeah, right, And I didn't pay any attention to them. And about a month later, they called again. And I figured it was some little rinky-dink outfit, and I didn't pay any attention to them. And then I got a letter from them, and they said, we've contacted people with your kind of airplane we want, which is yours. And they said, would you tell us what you think